The rain poured as Samantha stood on the mansion steps, clutching her crippled son, while her in-laws hurled her late husband's ashes into the fire. "You were never one of us," Rose spat, her diamond rings glinting like knives. They threw her out with nothing, not a penny, not a name. For months, she scrubbed diner floors just to keep her son alive, haunted by their laughter. But one morning, a stranger in a gray suit appeared at her repair shop, holding a letter sealed with her husband's name. What was inside that envelope would destroy everything the Hartwells thought they owned. Now watch how the woman they broke became the empire they feared. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. Before the world tried to tame her, Samantha Rivera was a storm on two wheels. The road was her kingdom, long open stretches of asphalt that shimmered beneath the sun, the kind that called to the wild-hearted. She was known among the Hell's Angels as Firesteel Sam, the woman who never feared the wind, the woman who rode like her soul was made of thunder. Her tattoos told stories of loyalty and loss, her hands bore scars from engines and battles, but her eyes burned with freedom. The night she met Michael Hartwell changed everything. It wasn't at a bar or a rally, but on a rain-slicked highway where fate had a cruel sense of humor. His silver Mercedes had broken down, stranded in the middle of nowhere, while Sam's Harley roared past like a ghost. She almost didn't stop. Men in suits were not her kind, but something in his desperate wave made her turn back. She fixed his car in the rain, grease on her hands, thunder overhead, and when he thanked her, his voice carried no judgment, only awe. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said. She smirked. "I'm never alone. The road's with me." He laughed, not mockingly, but softly, like he understood. It was the first sound that cracked through the wall she'd built around her heart. Michael was everything Sam wasn't supposed to love: polished, educated, heir to the Hartwell dynasty, a family whose money stretched across oil, real estate, and politics. His world was marble floors and chandeliers. Hers was leather jackets and open skies. But somehow they fit. He called her the woman made of fire and steel. She called him the calm before my storm. They didn't care what people thought. When she walked down the aisle in a black leather corset beneath her white veil, whispers filled the church. His family sat in silence, their disapproval thick as smoke. Rose Hartwell, Michael's mother, had leaned toward a guest and whispered, "This isn't a wedding. It's a rebellion." But Michael had eyes only for Sam. For years they were happy, in their own way. He taught her to slow down, she taught him to live. He built her a custom bike shop in the heart of the city, calling it Eli's Garage, named after the son they would one day have. And when little Eli was born, a fragile boy with legs that refused to work, their love only deepened. Sam would hold him on her lap as she worked on bikes, telling him, "You don't need to walk, baby. You'll fly one day." But the Hartwells never accepted her. They saw her as a stain on their name, a reckless woman unworthy of their fortune. And though Michael defended her every time, the tension grew. He began receiving threats, strange calls, documents gone missing, whispers in the company about betrayal and power shifts. Then one night, everything changed. Michael didn't come home. Sam waited by the window, her leather jacket draped over her shoulders, the rain outside turning the city into a blur of lights. Hours passed, then a knock at the door. Two officers stood there, their hats dripping wet, their expressions grim. "Mrs. Rivera," one began, "we're sorry to inform you." The words that followed shattered her. Michael was gone, found in his car at the bottom of a ravine. They called it an accident, but Sam knew better. He was too careful, too cautious, especially on those winding roads. Something inside her screamed that this was no accident. The funeral was a spectacle, hundreds attended, but only one mourner truly grieved. Sam stood beside the casket, dressed in black leather, her hand resting over Michael's heart. His family kept their distance, whispering venom behind their tears. Rose's voice cut through the whispers like a blade. "You've taken everything from us, Samantha. Even my son's peace." Sam looked up, her face pale, her eyes hollow. "I took nothing," she said quietly. "You're the ones who took him." But they didn't stop. Within days, the Hartwells moved fast, freezing her accounts, seizing control of Michael's shares, and filing claims that the will was under investigation. They called her unstable, unfit, unworthy of their empire. Lawyers came knocking, each one colder than the last. By the time the dust settled, she had nothing left. They gave her 1 day to leave the mansion. 1 day to pack the fragments of a life built on love and courage. She carried Eli in her arms, his wheelchair sold to pay for medicine, and stepped out into the cold morning. As the grand gates closed behind her, she felt the sound of the iron bars echo in her bones. For the first time in her life, the road felt cruel. They called her the biker widow, a cautionary tale of rebellion and ruin. But Sam didn't break. She couldn't. For Eli's sake, she swallowed her pain and turned it into steel. Every humiliation, every insult, every memory of Michael's laughter, she forged it into strength. Days turned into weeks, and the roar of motorcycles became her heartbeat again. She rode not for freedom now, but for survival. At night, she would sit by Eli's bedside in their tiny apartment, his small fingers clutching hers. "Mom," he whispered once, "will they ever say sorry?" Sam kissed his forehead. "Baby, some people never say sorry. But one day, they'll wish they had." That night, as the city slept, she rode alone through the empty streets. The wind whipped through her hair, carrying whispers of her past, laughter, loss, love, betrayal. She stopped at the edge of the river where Michael's car had been found and stared into the black water. She didn't cry. She couldn't. "I don't know who did this," she murmured, "but I'll find out. And when I do, I won't ask for justice. I'll be it." The reflection that stared back at her wasn't the broken widow they expected. It was a woman reborn, forged in fire, tempered in pain. From that night forward, the name Samantha Rivera meant something new. Not a biker. Not a widow. But a woman who had lost everything and refused to fall. The engines may have gone silent, but her spirit roared louder than ever. And somewhere in the shadows of power and greed, the people who destroyed her life had no idea that the storm they created was already coming for them. The rain didn't stop the day Samantha Rivera and her crippled son Eli were thrown out of the Hartwell mansion. It came down in heavy, cold sheets, washing the gold off the family crest above the iron gates as if even heaven wanted to erase their name. Sam stood there, soaked to the bone, clutching a single suitcase and holding Eli against her chest. He was small, fragile, his thin arms wrapped around her neck. Behind her, the guards shut the gates with a hollow clang, sealing her out of a world that had never truly let her in. For a long time, she didn't move. Her boots sank into the mud, the rain plastered her hair to her face, and her heart, her once untamed, roaring heart, felt like it had stopped beating. Everything she had built with Michael was gone, the house, the security, the respect. What remained was a world of cruel whispers and accusing eyes. "You were never good enough for him," Rose Hartwell's voice echoed in her mind. "And now the whole world will know it." The cab she flagged down didn't recognize her, just another woman in the storm, with a child too weak to walk. She told the driver to take her anywhere cheap. He dropped her off outside a peeling half-lit motel at the edge of the city. The neon sign flickered, rooms by the hour. The inside smelled of damp carpet and cigarettes. The mattress sagged, the walls were thin, and the rain leaked through the ceiling. But to Sam, it was shelter. She laid Eli on the bed, tucking him under her worn leather jacket to keep him warm. He looked up at her with those soft, trusting eyes, Michael's eyes. "Mom," he whispered, "are we poor now?" Her throat tightened. "No, baby," she said gently. "We're just in between." But the truth was harsher. They had nothing. The next morning, Sam sold her wedding ring. The pawnshop owner, a gray-haired man with pity in his eyes, handed her a few wrinkled bills and avoided her gaze. "It's not much," he said softly. "It's enough," she lied. She used the money to buy food for Eli and pay 2 more nights at the motel. Then, wearing her faded jeans and her father's old biker jacket, she went out looking for work. No one wanted to hire a woman with tattoos and a limp from a bike crash years ago. Doors closed in her face, one after another. By the 3rd day, she found a sign in a diner window, "Help wanted, cleaning staff." The manager, a thick man with greasy hands and an attitude to match, eyed her suspiciously. "You ever mopped floors before?" Sam stared him dead in the eye. "I've cleaned up worse." He laughed, handed her a rag and said, "Start now." That night, long after the customers left, Sam scrubbed the diner floors until her knuckles bled. Her reflection stared back at her in the mop water, Not the fearless Hell's Angels queen she once was, but a ghost of her former self. And yet, somewhere behind those tired eyes, something still burned. She worked every day, taking extra shifts, scraping by to feed Eli. The customers barely noticed her. Some mocked her tattoos. Others whispered when they saw her limping down the aisle with a tray of plates. Used to be somebody, one man sneered once. Now she's just another broken woman. Sam didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because every time she came home to Eli, his smile healed something in her. He would wait up for her, even when his body ached. "Mom," he'd say, "did you fix any bikes today?" "Not yet," she'd reply, tucking him in. "But soon. Real soon." And she meant it. A week later, she found a small, dusty motorcycle repair shop 3 blocks from the diner. The sign outside read Jack's Auto and Steel, but the owner, Jack, was old and nearly blind. He needed help, and Sam needed a purpose. She offered to work for almost nothing, just enough to buy groceries. On her first day, the familiar smell of oil and metal filled her lungs, and something inside her stirred. The tools, the engines, the grease-stained rags, this was her language, her world. Her hands, though blistered from cleaning, found rhythm again in the hum of engines. Jack watched her work with quiet admiration. "You've got the touch," he said. "Most men I've hired couldn't fix a carburetor without blowing something up." Sam smiled faintly. Machines don't lie. They just need patience. She stayed long after closing, fixing rusted bikes abandoned by time. Each repair was a small victory, a silent declaration that she was still alive. The roar of an engine after hours of labor felt like hearing her own heartbeat again. But every night, as she walked home, the whispers returned, the voices of her past. "You'll never be one of us. You don't belong here. You'll never rise again." And she would whisper back to the night, "Watch me." Money was tight. Sometimes she ate 1 meal a day so Eli could eat 2. The motel clerk eyed her suspiciously when she paid with coins, and the city looked at her like she was invisible. Yet every morning, she rose before dawn, packed Eli's school bag, kissed his forehead, and went to work. Eli, despite his wheelchair, never complained. One day he said, "I'll walk again, Mom. You'll see." Sam would smile, brushing his hair aside. "You already walk, baby. You just use wheels instead of legs." One evening, as she fixed a broken Harley in the shop, a group of bikers rolled past the window, the Hells Angels. Her old brothers. They didn't recognize her. Or maybe they did, and just didn't want to see what she had become. Her throat tightened, but she kept working, her hands steady. Because now, every bolt she tightened, every tire she patched, wasn't for the thrill of the road. It was for Eli. By the end of the month, her back ached, her fingers blistered, and her savings barely filled a coffee can, but her soul began to heal. Each day, she was piecing together the woman they had tried to destroy. And one night, as rain once again drummed softly on the motel roof, she sat by the window, watching Eli sleep. His tiny hand rested on her arm, his breathing even. She stared out at the city lights, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to whisper her dream aloud. "They think they buried me," she said quietly, "but they didn't know I was a seed." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, deep, low, promising. And in that small, flickering motel room, the woman who had lost everything found the one thing they could never take from her, the strength to rise again. Because though she had fallen, she knew this was only the beginning. From the ashes of her dignity, something greater was being born. The morning began like any other, cold, gray, and heavy with the weight of struggle. A thin mist hung over the city, wrapping the streets in a somber quiet. Inside Jack's Auto and Steel, Samantha Rivera wiped her hands on a rag and leaned against the counter, her body aching from another sleepless night. The smell of oil, rubber, and metal clung to her clothes, a scent that had become her new perfume, the smell of survival. Outside, the rumble of an engine broke the silence. A sleek black car pulled up, its shine too polished for this part of town. The driver stepped out, a tall man in a gray suit, shoes gleaming, his expression unreadable. He didn't belong here among the rust and grease. The sound of his footsteps echoed as he walked into the shop, the bell above the door chiming faintly. Sam looked up, cautious. "Can I help you?" He removed his hat, his tone respectful but serious. "Mrs. Rivera?" The title struck her like a whisper from another life, one she'd buried under months of hardship. "Who's asking?" she replied, suspicion coating her voice. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope, its paper thick and embossed with gold lettering. "My name is Charles Grant. I'm an attorney, or rather I was your husband's attorney." Her heart skipped. "Michael," she breathed, her voice trembling. "Yes," the man said softly. He left instructions for this letter to be delivered under specific conditions. "It took me months to find you." Sam's oil-stained hands reached out, shaking as she accepted the envelope. Her eyes traced the familiar handwriting on the front, "To my wife, Samantha, and my son, Eli." The sight alone unraveled her composure. Jack, the old mechanic, stepped out from the back, sensing the gravity in the air. "You all right, Sam?" She nodded faintly. "Yeah, just need a minute." The lawyer gave her a sympathetic nod. "I'll leave you to read it. There's also a document inside you'll want to see, his will. I'll return in a few days to discuss the details." He turned to leave, but before stepping out, he paused. "He loved you, Mrs. Rivera. More than you know." The bell chimed again as the door closed, leaving Sam standing there, the letter trembling in her grip. She walked to the small bench in the corner and sat down, her knees weak. For a long moment, she simply stared at the envelope, afraid to open it, afraid that touching it might make it vanish like everything else she had once loved. Finally, she tore it open. Inside were 2 folded pages, one handwritten, the other official and stamped. She unfolded the letter first. The familiar curve of Michael's handwriting sent a shiver through her. "My dearest Sam, if you're reading this, it means they've done what I feared. They've taken everything from you, everything we built together. But not forever. You and Eli will inherit what's truly yours when the truth comes out." Her eyes blurred as she read on. "I knew my family would come for you. They've always seen love as weakness and greed as power. So before they could act, I secured everything, every asset, every share, every property, in trust under Eli's name. $500 million worth of what we built. It's yours, Sam, because it was never theirs." She pressed a hand over her mouth, the breath catching in her chest. "But the money is only a tool. What I leave you is faith, faith in yourself, faith in the strength that first made me fall in love with you. You are the woman who rebuilt my heart. You'll rebuild your world too. And when you do, tell our son that his father never stopped believing in him." The letter ended with his familiar sign-off, "Ride free, my fire and steel." Her tears finally fell, landing on the ink, smudging the words that once came from his soul. The official document that followed confirmed it all, illegally sealed with detailed hidden accounts in the Cayman Islands, trust funds under Eli's name, and deeds to several properties scattered across states. Her name appeared as sole executor. Her mind reeled. The Hartwells had lied, all of them. They hadn't just taken her dignity, they had stolen her legacy. Michael had foreseen it all, and even in death, he had protected her. Sam leaned back, staring at the letter, her heart pounding. For the first time in months, the fog of despair began to lift. $500 million, she whispered, not in awe of the number, but in disbelief that Michael had planned all this, not out of greed but love. Jack peeked around the corner again. "Sam? You look like you've seen a ghost." She smiled faintly through her tears. "I did, Jack. But it's a ghost that finally gave me hope." When she left the shop that evening, the sky was painted in shades of gold and crimson. She clutched the letter close to her heart as she walked back to the motel. Every step felt different, lighter, purposeful, alive. Eli was waiting by the window, his small face lighting up when he saw her. "Mom, you're home." She knelt beside his bed, brushing the hair from his forehead. "I've got something to tell you, baby," she said softly. "Is it good news?" "The best." She pulled the letter from her jacket. "It's from your dad." Eli's eyes widened. "Daddy." She nodded, unfolding the paper. Her voice shook as she began to read, each word pouring life back into their broken world. By the time she finished, Eli was crying, but they were happy tears, the kind they hadn't known in so long. "Does this mean we're rich, Mom?" he asked, half laughing through his tears. Sam smiled and kissed his forehead. "It means we have a future, baby. And it means your daddy never stopped fighting for us." That night, after Eli drifted off to sleep, Sam sat by the window, staring out into the city. The streetlights reflected in her eyes like tiny flames. For months she had lived in the ashes of her dignity, but now she held proof that her life still had meaning, that her pain had not been in vain. She looked over at Eli, sleeping peacefully, his small chest rising and falling. She reached out, gently taking his hand in hers. "They took everything, baby," she whispered, her voice firm, steady. "But they'll never take what's ours. Not again." Outside, thunder rolled softly, not a storm this time, but a promise. And in that dim motel room, Samantha Rivera, the woman the world had written off, felt the fire in her heart return. From that night onward, she stopped living to survive. She began living to reclaim what was rightfully hers. Because somewhere out there, hidden beneath layers of greed and deception, lay not just fortune, but justice. And for the first time in a long time, Sam smiled, whispering into the quiet, "They took our dignity, baby, but they'll never take our destiny." The Hartwell mansion glittered that night like a shrine to arrogance. Dozens of luxury cars lined the driveway, their headlights reflecting off marble steps that once echoed beneath Samantha Rivera's boots. Inside, laughter and classical music spilled through the air, blending into the symphony of wealth and vanity that the Hartwells called celebration. It had been weeks since Sam discovered Michael's letter, weeks of quiet endurance, of carefully controlled fury. The will still sat locked in her drawer, waiting for the right moment. But tonight, that moment felt closer. The invitation had arrived 2 days ago, gold-embossed, perfumed, and soaked in mockery. "The Hartwells request the honor of your presence at a private gala to celebrate the family's enduring legacy." Sam knew exactly what it meant. A reminder. A test. A spectacle. They wanted to see her break again. She accepted. When the night came, she wore no diamonds, no silk, only a simple black dress and dignity as her armor. Her son Eli, dressed neatly in a white shirt and small black vest, held her hand as they approached the gates. His wheelchair gleamed under the moonlight, polished and proud. The guards hesitated, then opened the gates. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Inside, chandeliers hung like captured stars. The smell of champagne, perfume, and arrogance filled the air. The guests, businessmen, politicians, old money and new, turned as the doors opened. Conversations froze, glasses paused mid-air. The fallen widow had returned. Sam's heels clicked softly against the marble, her posture calm, her expression unreadable. The whispers began immediately. "Is that her? The biker widow? She looks different." "No, she looks dangerous." Across the room, Rose Hartwell stood beside her husband, a glass of wine in hand. Her red gown shimmered, but her smile was sharper than glass. When her eyes met Sam's, her lips curved into something cruel. "Well, well," Rose said as Sam approached the table. "The ghost of scandal graces us with her presence." Sam said nothing. She only guided Eli's wheelchair to a quiet spot beside her seat. "Oh, how thoughtful," Rose added, feigning surprise. "You brought your child." The word hung in the air like an insult. Eli looked down, his small hands clutching the armrests. Sam placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "My son," she said, her voice calm. "His name is Eli. You do well to remember it." A few guests exchanged uneasy glances, but Rose's smile didn't waver. "How touching," she said, raising her glass. "Still clinging to that defiance, are we? Tell me, Samantha, how does it feel to fall from heaven straight into the dirt?" Sam met her gaze, unblinking. "Not nearly as painful as falling from grace and pretending you haven't." The table fell silent. A single violinist faltered mid-note. Rose's husband, Charles Hartwell, cleared his throat awkwardly. "Now, Rose, let's not ruin the evening. We're here to celebrate." "Celebrate what?" Sam asked quietly. "The theft of a man's life work? Or the lies you built on his grave?" A few of the guests turned pale. Others pretended not to hear. Rose laughed, a brittle, venomous sound. "My dear, we built this family long before you stumbled into it. You brought nothing but disgrace to our name. You and your tattoos, your wild life, your dirt under the nails kind of love. You should have stayed where you belonged. The streets suit your kind." The words sliced through the air like knives. Laughter followed, cruel and echoing, bouncing off the marble walls. Sam stood still, her hands resting lightly on the back of Eli's chair. The laughter washed over her like rain over stone. For a long moment, she said nothing, just stared into the crystal glass in front of her, watching the bubbles rise and pop. Then she lifted her eyes to Rose. Calm. Clear. Cold. "Enjoy tonight," she said softly. Rose blinked. "Excuse me." Sam's lips curved into the faintest smile, not of mockery, but of warning. "Enjoy tonight. It's the last time you'll toast to stolen dreams." The laughter stopped. The words hung in the air like thunder before a storm. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. Somewhere in the corner, a champagne flute cracked as a waiter dropped his tray. Rose tilted her head, her smile faltering for the first time. "You think you can threaten us?" "No," Sam said, her voice low but steady. "I don't threaten. I promise." Eli looked up at her, his eyes wide. Even he could feel it, the shift, the quiet power that had begun to pulse from his mother. Rose's mask of elegance began to slip. "You're delusional," she snapped. "You have nothing." Sam's gaze didn't waver. "Nothing is exactly what you'll have soon. And when that day comes, remember this moment. Remember that I warned you." Charles Hartwell stepped forward, his voice tight. "That's enough. You're lucky we even allowed you to come. Don't forget whose roof you're standing under." Sam took a slow step toward him. "I don't forget, Mr. Hartwell. I remember everything, every lie, every forged signature, every night you made my husband doubt himself." Her voice softened, but the steel in it didn't fade. "Michael trusted you. You used that trust to destroy him. But the truth doesn't stay buried forever. It's coming for all of you." Her words hit like lightning. The room crackled with unease. No one dared to speak. Then quietly, she turned back to Eli. "Come on, baby. We're leaving." As she guided his wheelchair through the silent hall, guests parted like waves before her. No one dared meet her eyes. The same woman they'd mocked minutes ago now carried something they couldn't name, something dangerous, something righteous. At the door, Sam paused and turned one last time. Her gaze found Rose, who stood frozen beside her untouched glass of wine. "I may have been the woman from the streets," Sam said, her voice echoing through the hall. "But at least I never sold my soul to stay out of them." Then she walked out, the sound of her heels striking marble like the toll of a distant bell. Outside, the cold night air met her face. She took a deep breath, the weight of humiliation melting into resolve. The stars above gleamed faintly, as if they knew what was coming. Eli looked up at her. "Mom, are you okay?" She smiled, brushing her fingers through his hair. "I'm better than okay, baby. I just saw the end of a dynasty, they just don't know it yet." As the car drove away, the mansion behind them glowed like a beacon of pride soon to crumble. The laughter that once mocked her would one day echo back as silence. If you were in Sam's shoes, humiliated, cornered, but holding the truth in your hands, what would you do? Would you walk away, or fight back? Tell us in the comments below. The sun had barely touched the horizon when the world of the Hartwells began to collapse. Inside the marble corridors of the mansion, the morning calm was broken by chaos, the shrill ringing of phones, the flashing of alerts, the desperate shouts of servants and secretaries. Rose Hartwell, still in her silk nightgown, burst from her room, her face pale beneath the expensive layers of makeup. Her husband, Charles, was already downstairs, shouting into his phone. "Call the bank again," he barked. "Something's wrong with the accounts." But there was no answer. Every call ended in the same way: silence, confusion, and fear. The vast empire they had once ruled, the one they built on deceit, manipulation, and stolen legacy, was unraveling before their eyes. Their son, Edward, stormed into the room clutching a tablet. "Dad, you need to see this." His voice trembled as he turned the screen toward them. Dozens of news headlines glared in bold text. Hartwell Industries under investigation, new documents reveal fraud, forgery, and stolen assets. Michael Hartwell's true will surfaces, wife and son named sole heirs. The world was watching. Rose's hand flew to her chest. "This can't be true," she gasped. "It can't." But the evidence was undeniable. Leaked files, sealed signatures, bank transfers, Every crime they'd buried under money and influence had surfaced. Michael's hidden will, the same one they'd sworn never existed, was now public record. And it left everything to Samantha Rivera and her son, Eli. The empire of deceit had been built high, but it was built on sand. Charles slammed his hand against the marble counter, his voice cracking with rage. Who leaked it? Who had access? But deep down, he knew the answer. Somewhere, the ghost of the man he betrayed, the son he drove to his death, had finally come home for justice. Within an hour, news vans swarmed the estate. Cameras flashed outside the iron gates. Reporters shouted questions through the intercom. Mr. Hartwell, how do you respond to the fraud allegations? Is it true you forged your son's will? Will you be pressing charges against Samantha Rivera? The mansion's grandeur, once a symbol of untouchable power, now looked like a fortress under siege. Servants whispered in corners. Investors withdrew their money. Partners fled like rats abandoning a sinking ship. And then the final blow came. The bank froze every Hartwell account. Their stocks plummeted. Properties were seized pending investigation. The empire they had spent a lifetime building collapsed in hours, a digital implosion of greed and guilt. Rose staggered, her knees buckling as she clutched the railing. We'll fight this, she whispered, her voice trembling. We'll call the lawyers, we'll. Charles interrupted, his voice breaking. The lawyers are gone, Rose. They've dropped us. They're saying we're finished. Rose stared at him, her eyes wide, her pride crumbling into panic. Finished? We can't be finished. But the truth was merciless. Upstairs, their grandchildren's laughter, once the echo of a perfect family image, had been replaced by silence. Downstairs, the housekeeper handed in her resignation. No one wanted to be associated with the name Hartwell anymore. Then, as if to crown their humiliation, the television in the living room came to life. A live broadcast filled the screen, reporters standing outside the courthouse, announcing the news the world had been waiting for. Moments ago, a federal court confirmed the validity of Michael Hartwell's original will. Ownership of all Hartwell properties, assets and accounts has been officially transferred to his widow, Samantha Rivera, and their son, Eli Rivera. Rose let out a strangled gasp. The glass in her hand shattered on the marble floor. Charles sank into the nearest chair, his hands trembling. She did this, he whispered. That woman, she did this. But Rose wasn't listening. Her world had fallen apart, and for the first time in her life, she had no power left to rebuild it. She collapsed onto the floor, fainting as the reporters' voices continued to echo through the room like a funeral bell. Outside, the once proud Hartwell gates were now guarded by men with court orders. The crest above the arch, polished for generations, was covered with tape that read property under legal hold. Across town, while the empire of greed burned, Samantha Rivera stood on the balcony of her small apartment, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. The morning light washed over her face, soft and golden. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to breathe freely. The city was waking up, but for her, this dawn was different. It was the rebirth of everything they tried to destroy. She looked out toward the skyline, the horizon glowing in orange hues, and whispered to the wind, "You see that, Michael? We made it." Behind her, Eli rolled toward the balcony, his eyes still sleepy. "Mom? What happened?" Sam smiled, kneeling beside him. "Justice happened, baby." The truth finally spoke. He grinned. "Does that mean we're rich now?" She laughed softly, brushing his hair back. "It means we're free." For a long time, they just sat there, mother and son, watching the sunrise that painted a new beginning. Below them, the world that had once mocked them now buzzed with their names. Reporters speculated, neighbors whispered, and across every headline, one truth stood tall: the Riveras had reclaimed their destiny. As the warmth of the sun touched her face, Sam felt the fire within her settle into calm. She didn't rejoice in their downfall. She didn't crave revenge anymore. She had already won, not through destruction, but through truth. And though the Hartwells would spend the rest of their lives drowning in the ruins of their greed, Sam had something far greater: peace. She took Eli's hand and whispered, "You see, baby, when you build something with love, it lasts. But when you build with lies, it falls the moment truth rises." In the distance, a police convoy rolled toward the mansion. Reporters swarmed like vultures. The mighty Hartwells were finally facing what they had earned. But Sam didn't look back. She turned her gaze toward the horizon and smiled through quiet tears. Justice had arrived, silent, inevitable, and hers. If you had the power to destroy those who destroyed your family, would you show mercy, or let them taste their own cruelty? Share your thoughts in the comments. The morning was clear, golden sunlight spilling across the manicured lawns of the Hartwell estate, the same estate Samantha Rivera had once left in tears. But today, she wasn't walking through those gates as a widow or an outcast. She was coming home as the rightful owner. The iron gates, once slammed shut behind her with cold finality, now swung open at her approach. The guards straightened as her car rolled in, heads bowed in respect. Even the house seemed to hold its breath, as if realizing that the woman it once rejected had returned not to beg, but to reign. Sam stepped out of the car, dressed not in luxury but in quiet elegance, a white blouse, black trousers, and a small silver locket around her neck. Her boots clicked on the stone path, steady and confident. The same steps that once echoed with her humiliation now carried the sound of her redemption. The staff, maids, gardeners, and butlers, lined up by the entrance. Some of them had looked away the day she was thrown out, pretending not to see her pain. Now, they couldn't meet her eyes, guilt softening their faces. She paused before them, her voice calm but resolute. "You don't owe me apologies," she said. "But from this day on, no one in this house will be treated the way I was. Respect will live here, or nothing will." A murmur of relief swept through the staff. One older maid, the same woman who had once slipped a piece of bread into Eli's pocket when they were starving, stepped forward, eyes wet. "Welcome home, Mrs. Rivera," she whispered. Sam nodded softly. "Thank you. But it's not just my home anymore." As she walked through the grand doors, her eyes scanned the familiar hallways, now hers again. The air smelled the same, polished wood, roses, and memories. Portraits of the Hartwell ancestors lined the walls, their painted faces staring down with haughty indifference. But one portrait, the one of her late husband Michael, stood apart, untouched by dust or decay. Sam stopped before it, her throat tightening. His eyes, forever kind, seemed to look at her still. "You kept your promise," she whispered. "Now it's my turn to keep mine." For a moment, the house was silent except for the soft creak of the chandeliers and the faint sound of her son's laughter outside. That laughter, Eli's laughter, filled the empty spaces where pride and cruelty once lived. Later that day, reporters gathered outside as the new owner of the Hartwell empire stepped onto the marble steps for a press statement. Flashbulbs exploded as microphones thrust forward. "Mrs. Rivera," one reporter shouted, "now that the court has awarded you full ownership of the estate and the business empire, what are your plans?" Sam's gaze swept across the crowd, the faces eager for vengeance, for drama. But her voice was serene. "My husband believed in building something that lasts longer than wealth. I intend to honor that." She paused, her tone firm but warm. "Today, I'm announcing the creation of the Eli Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping disabled children and families who've been left behind, just like my son once was." The crowd erupted into murmurs. The same media that had once painted her as a scandalous widow now hung on her every word. "This mansion," she continued, "will become the headquarters of the foundation. What was once a symbol of greed and division will now serve as a place of healing, education, and hope. No child will ever be turned away. Not while I'm here." The reporters were stunned. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't celebrating her victory. She was transforming it into something greater. Behind her, the tall glass doors opened, and Eli was wheeled out by a nurse. The boy's eyes sparkled with joy as he waved shyly at the crowd. Sam knelt beside him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "This," she said, her voice breaking slightly, "is why I fought. For my son. For every child who's ever been told they're not enough. For every mother who's ever been told to know her place." Cameras clicked. Some of the reporters lowered their microphones, visibly moved. Inside the mansion, the staff began making quiet changes, removing Rose Hartwell's portrait from the main hall, storing away the relics of cruelty that had once defined the family. The ballroom, once used for lavish parties, now hosted rows of chairs and tables, ready for the first foundation meeting. Sam spent the afternoon walking through each room, not to claim it, but to cleanse it. The music room, where she had once been mocked for not knowing proper etiquette. The dining hall, where Rose had once sneered at her accent. The marble staircase, where she had carried Eli out in her arms that terrible night. Every step she took now erased another wound. As she reached the balcony overlooking the gardens, she saw children from the Foundation's new outreach program playing on the grass, running, laughing, free. The sound filled her chest with something she hadn't felt in years: peace. Jack, the old mechanic who had once given her a job when no one else would, arrived later that evening. He looked out of place among the chandeliers, wiping his greasy hands on his pants. "So this is where you ended up, huh?" he said with a grin. Sam laughed. "Guess I finally traded the garage for marble floors." Jack nodded toward Eli, who was showing his wheelchair tricks to a group of children. "He's got your fire," he said. "Yeah," she replied softly. "But maybe now he'll get to use it for something better." As the sun began to set, the mansion glowed with a light it had never known, not the artificial glow of chandeliers, but the golden hue of purpose. That night, standing in the grand hall beneath Michael's portrait, Sam whispered, "You were right, love. It was never about revenge. It was about rewriting what this place stands for." For the first time since Michael's death, the mansion was filled not with bitterness or fear, but with laughter, real, untainted laughter. The woman they once mocked as the biker widow had become something greater, a queen who ruled not through power or pride, but through grace. And though the Hartwell name would forever be tarnished, the Rivera legacy, born from love, pain, and resilience, would live on in every smile echoing through those once cold halls. The queen had returned. But she didn't come to sit on a throne. She came to lift others from the ground. The roar of engines split the morning silence like thunder rolling over the city. Hundreds of motorcycles stretched down the boulevard, chrome gleaming under the rising sun. Their riders, men and women from every walk of life, wore matching vests emblazoned with the emblem "Ride for Hope." At the front of the procession rode Samantha Rivera, leather jacket zipped halfway, her hair whipping in the wind. The same woman once branded a disgrace was now a symbol of strength, redemption, and grace. The air carried the scent of gasoline and new beginnings, and beneath the rumble of engines was a hum of unity, bikers riding not for rebellion, but for purpose. The sight was breathtaking, a sea of motorcycles trailing behind the woman who had once lost everything. Now she led them toward something greater, a promise fulfilled. It had been 6 months since justice reclaimed her life, since the Hartwell empire crumbled under the weight of its own deceit. In that time, Sam had poured every ounce of her heart into something new, the Michael Hartwell Children's Hospital. Built from her late husband's fortune, it stood as a towering monument of love reborn from suffering. As she approached the hospital gates, the engines began to slow. The riders parked in neat rows, filling the street with gleaming machines and leather vests marked by the same phrase, "Freedom through compassion." Children waved from the hospital's balconies, their laughter echoing across the courtyard. Reporters jostled for position as cameras flashed, capturing the moment that had once seemed impossible. The woman who had been mocked, abandoned, and left to fend for herself was now changing lives in ways that went beyond money. Eli waited at the finish line. He sat in his new custom wheelchair, a sleek model she designed with the help of one of her biker friends, its frame engraved with the words, "Keep rolling, little warrior." His face was brighter now, his cheeks fuller, his spirit unshakable. When he saw his mother approaching, he raised his small fist in the air, cheering, "Go, Mom!" Sam laughed through tears. She cut the engine and swung off the bike, the applause of hundreds of riders washing over her like music. For a moment, she just stood there, breathing it all in, the faces, the freedom, the future she'd fought for. An announcer's voice boomed through the speakers, "Ladies and gentlemen, today marks the grand opening of the Michael Hartwell Children's Hospital, a place of healing, hope, and second chances, founded by a woman who reminds us that strength isn't born from power, it's born from pain." The crowd erupted in cheers. Sam walked toward the ribbon, holding the scissors in one hand and Eli's small hand in the other. The red satin glimmered in the sunlight. Cameras flashed, capturing every second, this moment of full-circle triumph. But in her heart, she wasn't thinking about revenge, or victory, or wealth. She was thinking about the man who had believed in her when no one else did. The man whose name now graced the hospital walls. "Michael," she whispered under her breath, "we made it." With a gentle smile, she cut the ribbon. The crowd roared, and confetti rained down like colorful sparks of redemption. Eli turned to her, his eyes wide. "Mom," he said softly, "Dad would be proud." She crouched beside him, her voice trembling but steady. "He's here, baby. In every wall, every smile, every life we help." The hospital doors opened, revealing bright corridors painted with murals of open roads, sunsets, and wings, symbols of freedom and hope. Inside, children in wheelchairs rolled alongside nurses and doctors, their laughter filling the air. For many of them, this hospital wasn't just a place of treatment, it was a place where they could believe in themselves again. Sam walked through the lobby, reporters trailing her. One of them called out, "Mrs. Rivera, how does it feel to be a millionaire now?" She stopped, turned to face the crowd, and smiled, a smile filled with calm strength. "I'm not rich because of money," she said. "I'm rich because I finally have peace." The words hung in the air, soft but powerful, resonating far beyond the walls of the hospital. Cameras clicked furiously, capturing her grace. Outside, the bikers cheered again, revving their engines in salute. The thunder rolled through the city like a heartbeat, a sound that once symbolized rebellion now echoing with purpose. Sam stepped back outside, taking Eli's hand once more. The hospital's sign gleamed in gold letters. "The Michael Hartwell Children's Hospital, where hope rides free." As she looked out over the horizon, the setting sun painted the sky in crimson and gold, the same colors as her first bike, the one she'd rebuilt piece by piece during her darkest days. Jack, the old mechanic who had given her a job when she had nothing, rolled up beside her on his Harley. He grinned, his weathered face creased with pride. "You did it, Firesteel," he said. "You turned pain into power." Sam chuckled, her voice soft but resolute. "No, Jack. We turned it into purpose." Behind them, the roar of engines rose again as hundreds of riders prepared to set out on the charity ride's final lap, circling the city in honor of every child who would find hope within those hospital walls. Sam mounted her bike one last time, Eli watching from the hospital steps, his smile radiant under the fading light. She turned the key, the familiar rumble filling her chest like a living heartbeat. As she rode out, the wind whipped through her hair, and the city stretched before her, endless, alive, full of promise. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't fighting to survive. She was free. The road ahead glowed beneath the golden sunset, and every turn of her wheels carried her closer to the future she had built from ashes. The woman the world once mocked, the biker widow, the outcast, the mother who refused to give up, had rewritten her story. She no longer rode for escape. She rode for every soul who had ever been broken, every child who needed hope, every mother who had ever been told she was nothing. And as the engines roared behind her, she whispered into the wind, "This time, I ride toward the sunrise. Unchained. Unbroken. Undefeated." Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.